Here's the thing. Christianity is not the only religion that deals with or fixates on struggle. According to Buddhism, all of life is suffering, and suffering is caused by attachments to worldly things. It is something that must be transcended by not clinging to material objects or relationships. In Hinduism, many Hindus view suffering as punishment for misdeeds committed in their lifetime or past lives. It's where that whole karma thing comes in. In Islam, the very word Islam means submission, so many Muslims understand that to include suffering or enduring pain or loss is a way of submitting to the will of Allah. And in Judaism, some believe that suffering is caused by a weakness in one's devotion to God. But Christianity takes it to a whole nother level. The question of the unjustified suffering of the innocent is at the heart of Christianity, which holds that a sinless man, Jesus, suffered and died for the sins of humanity. Some Christians see suffering as God's punishment of sinful people or the world as a whole. Others see suffering as a way of a loving God testing the faith and the fortitude of us here on earth. The 4th century Saint Augustine says that God would not allow any evil to exist unless out of it he could draw out a greater good. There's also a guy named Viktor Frankl who says suffering ceases to be suffering the moment that it finds meaning. Catch that. Suffering ceases to be suffering the moment it finds meaning. And I think that's what Black gospel artists and preachers are getting at, but they're squeezing a really big idea like that down into a 3-minute song or a 30-minute non-interactive sermon. And that's likely going to leave a lot of us to our own devices. And for a lot of people, the meaning they find in suffering is to live in or to create a victim narrative that, for a bevy of reasons, most notably that God takes care of the victims, serves them a purpose. I'm saying that while most religions look at suffering as something that we can and should seek to correct, the Christian or the Black gospel take seems to be more about something that we are waiting on God to correct, which I think creates 2 issues. One, we can allow ourselves to just be lulled into this passive way of engaging life since we think God is just going to come and correct it all anyway. Or 2, we engage everything in life like it's a fight, because fighting, struggling, wrestling is how we know that the will of God is active in our life. You heard some of the preachers say it in the clip, that I know that I'm doing God's will when I'm in a struggle. You ever met a Christian who's like always down for a fight? In their mind, that's how they know that God is using them. I wonder how history would be different if our forefathers like Martin Luther King or even our contemporary icons like Trayvon Martin's parents were to just sort of accept the passive idea that God is going to come and fix it, and so all we got to do is wait it out. On the other hand, I wonder about people who think that fighting through stuff is how they know that the Spirit of God is present. So like if I'm in a conversation with somebody and we don't agree, we come to a disagreement, well, now I got to fight with you, because fighting for my point, fighting for Jesus is how I know that the Spirit of God is alive and active. It's concerning. There are some modern theologians, some contemporaries, that are giving us ways to use our faith, to exercise our faith in ways that are bigger than just ourselves and more global. People who are helping us think about how not to allow our faith to just become like a hammock where we just sort of rest and relax and wait for God to rescue, but also not to use our faith like a bullhorn where we just go around berating other people and getting in fights with other people about our faith, but actually using our faith more like a carpentry tool in ways that help us build and affect the world in ways that are more meaningful and more kingdom-minded. People like James Cone and Van Jones and Michelle Alexander and Dominique Gilliard and Leroy Barber and just so many other people that are helping us learn how to take messaging, how to take the gospel message and utilize it in a way that is better for the world, better for that world that God so loved, and not just about me, myself, and mine. Speaking of cool people, over the last few months, I've conducted a bunch of interviews with people who have really deep footprints in the Black church and in Black gospel music. And they've had some really interesting things to say. And I want you to check them out. What do you think the or a recurring message is in gospel music?
I would say that it returns to the struggle, which is very interesting because you think that, okay, well, we got that message already.
Sure.
But,
so
you know,
I was raised in the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. I guess my earliest memories were 6 or 7 years old.
My earliest memories of church was about 4 or 5. I was baptized at Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church in Joliet, Illinois. I remember the days of celebrations when we had to wear the dashikis.
It's crazy because I've grew up in the church since birth, of course, but I never knew the exact titles, I guess you could say. Like, I guess I would be Kojic because, you know, that's what I grew up in, Church of God in Christ.
You've been in church your whole...
Actually, I was telling the choir this the other day that I can probably count on 2 hands the Sundays that I've actually missed church.
But I think there's like a word for it, but I never really...
What do you mean?
What is it? It's not like Pentecostal, right?
In my life.
Yeah, I was just like in it.
I remember the first song I learned in the church, the kids' choir, was Wade in the Water. Wade in the water, God's gonna trouble the water.
Did they tell you what that song was about?
Absolutely not.
Do you have a favorite gospel? I mean, I know this.
I do. It's ridiculous.
You do?
I do. It's ridiculous.
Tell me.
You know, and so I remember then as a kid, I remember hearing testimonies, but I didn't really know what they were. You know what I mean? It was just people getting up, and as a kid, you thought it's just somebody getting up complaining until they got to the end. But I thank God.
Mahalia Jackson and saying "Troubles of the World."
Overcoming was a song of triumph. They were songs of overcoming. They were songs of relief and release. They gave you hope. They reminded you, the cadence in them reminded you that it's going to be better tomorrow. Brighter day is coming, light at the end of the tunnel, heaven is your home. Forget about all the troubles of this time. Know that you're going to be okay.
Everything is gonna be all right. He's coming back. Boom, boom, like he said he would.
Music is what kept me really, I think, kept me grounded in church.
Whatever I was going through, there was a message of hope, of healing, that greater is coming.
The nature of a Shirley Caesar song. Seems like there was always a major conflict somehow, and somebody was about to get annihilated off the face of the earth, and God swoops in like a superhero and rescues them, and then everybody starts shouting.
Imagine blending the best gospel musician you can think of and putting them on a pipe organ. Yes, that is it. Oh.
The music of the choir.
Woo! We can sing anything.
I feel like in a kind of a negative way at certain times, I feel like when I got it growing up, I felt like it was, call him when you want something. And I think that's how I got out of it when I was growing up, learning about his word, is that, when you need something, call him. And then as I got older, I started to realize, just thank him for, just because you woke up this morning, thank him for, just having even a decent day. It might not have been perfect, but just thank him. Like, don't always just talk to him when you need something. And there was a time when I was always crying or wanting something from him. And I'm just like, I gotta stop doing that because that's not okay.
Most gospel songs are about the getting over the hump, if you will. Don't let what's in front of you right now determine what's for you down the road, kind of, you know. So yeah, most black gospel songs are about overcoming something.
I would say my generation, the music is everything. The music is probably more important than the word. For me, gospel music has saved my life. I lost my mom at 14, and it was gospel music that kept me. To be able to sing and to sing myself happy when I wasn't.
The soundtrack of gospel to me is almost every song Sam Cooke and the Soulsters ever did. They all talked about the coming of, you know, when I get to glory, you know, those songs. Don't Feel No Ways Tired, you know, so that was the black anthem.
Yeah, that was our heritage. That's our culture. You push through. We push through today. We push through 200 years ago. We push through 400 years ago. You push through, and the songs would serve to be that bedrock for us. The songs would serve to bolster us, and you're walking around because you remember your grandmother walking around singing while she was cooking or cleaning or.
Gospel music is to me like the musical side of preaching. I feel like a lot of people, even me sometimes, don't really pay attention to the word. I just feel like music is easier to understand.
There's Daniel in the lion's den, there's Shadrach, Meshach, and a bad Negro. Some of the same stories that you hear just throughout Christendom, but our perspective allows us to take the story of the whale swallowing Jonah and take that negative thing and make it into a positive thing.
But, you know, we're still, when I think about, you know, this recent song that Donald Lawrence did with Leandria Johnson, This Is My Exodus, Deliver Me. Oh God, Jesus, they doing it.
For the 23rd Psalm, you can hear that 25 different ways, and every time it's just as powerful. And every time you're reminded that no matter what comes, he's going to, he's walking with you.
It's that, you know, black folks have never really had an opportunity to heal from the things, not only what we're experiencing, but the things that pass down through us genetically, the trauma that has passed down. And
go with Leandria Johnson for a second. What do you think she's singing about?
Pain and a struggle.
The music that is created through black gospel artists is that of hope, is to create hope and to keep hope, that it wouldn't last as long as it did, or it won't be this way always, you know. Trouble don't last always.
And it's just good. Sometimes you don't know why, but you know you feel better when you went to church. You feel better.
What use is there of God for you? Like, why is God useful?
Wow, that's a good question.
My black church background? Well, I was raised in a black Baptist church with black people. I was raised in church, so I was a baby. I was in church and I started participating in the kids choir. Went on to lead the youth choir, the young adult choir. It's called the Voices of Shiloh. So we did like these huge concerts. You know, when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, we did.
At 8 years old, what kind of songs are you singing, or what kind of?
James Cleveland. We sang adult songs as kids choir, but we always had like a little flair to them, and you know, it was always super jamming. It was always fun. Any good room, choose your seat and sit down. Soon and very soon we are going to see the King. Will there be any mountains to climb? Will there be any valleys to something wrong. God will supply everything that we need, and we'll meet you on the other side. Something like that. Soon and very soon, we are going to see the King. Hallelujah, hallelujah, we're going to see the King. Angel was really pretty hype most of the time. I think music was a catalyst that got me locked in, but after a while, it just became a part of my heart, and
Having been a musician that long, you've like had a front row seat to the, what do you call that, the eras of gospel music, gospel entertainment, even gospel preaching, even gospel TV. What would you say are some of the eras, the seasons, the trends, the messaging of Black gospel music preaching?
Up until probably like the 80s, music was mostly about the struggle. It was all about struggle. It was always about hardship and how God was going to deliver you from hardship. And that's really, I think that's the crux of gospel in its truest form, is taking the overall arching struggle of the person of color, and with a story of hope and a way out, a deliverer, and kind of merging those together. It's, you come through this, but you have a superhero. You have someone that can come to your aid, and that was a lot. And then going to heaven, the struggle down here, and I can't wait to get to heaven, because this is some crap. Can I say that? Then through the 80s and 90s, I think it was really more of a progressive message. And so if God's not coming to get us, what are we doing? What are we supposed to be doing with our lives? And 12 years, I would say, maybe 15 years, somewhere around there, how what was traditionally a gospel music sound and what was a European or Caucasian sound kind of come together and make this sound of God. I mean, really a sound of God's voice.
And so nobody else have I told them what my thesis is, but you're already talking about my thesis. And
there are a lot of things that we call God that are just worship style. God is God with our worship, without our worship. God is God regardless, and we kind of put him into these little icons and these little things that are really just worship style. It's just a preference. It's what you were told and how you were raised and what you've experienced, basically. Yeah, when you hear what we consider a foundational message tied to your faith, you hear that over and over, week by week by week. It informs all parts of your life. I mean, even like your career choices, how you deal with your family, your friends, what you aspire to be. You find a lot of people with their identity wrapped into this church. I mean, and it's interesting because they're usually here one day a week, but that one day they live into this life, this persona or this duty or this mission. And without that, I feel like sometimes people get lost, because they haven't really been taught how to live outside the struggle. What do you do with your life if you're not in conflict? How do you address God? How do you even deal with God when you're not calling on him to be your savior? And when you're not in struggle, what do? You get bored. So I think sometimes people create struggles just because they have something to do.
And being essentially indoctrinated with messaging from Black gospel entertainment and music, do they know? Yes
and no. I say yes because you can't help but understand that that's what it is. What do you do about it? Not much you do about it, because that is almost what's sold from the top down. Meaning you're in conflict, you're in struggle, and you need God. And I need to be the one that tells you that you need God. You need me to bring you to that reality. And then you need me to point you in the direction to go get the necessary help that you need.
A little bit, but do you think messaging is getting better?
I do. It had to get better because people weren't really buying it anymore. Newer preachers are doing a better job of messaging, and getting people to live into a place of power as opposed to a place of dependence.
I had such a great time. I had such an inspiring time just listening to people talk about their black church story or their black gospel perspective. One of the things that I thought was really cool that happened with every single person I interviewed was that when I asked them to tell me about their black church history or their black gospel music insight, the first thing that happened, this is across the board with everybody, the first thing that happened was like just this smile, this sense of joy just washed over everybody. And I think that's a beautiful thing about gospel music, and it's why I spent so much time trying to delve into this subject, because I just think it's so important. I think it's that important to so many people's lives. Why Elias started to share his thoughts about why so many preachers have so many sermons that hinge on the no matter what you're going through narrative. And essentially what he started to say was they preach it because it works. And I get what he's saying. I get what he means. Everybody goes to church. Nobody goes to church wanting to leave the way they came. You want to go. You want to be inspired, encouraged, uplifted, challenged. And you want to leave there feeling better, emotionally better, mentally better. You want to leave there with something. And so I get the idea that those messages work for the moment. I guess I would just propose that there are other messages that could go a long way to help us all be better. My first spiritual guide, probably not unlike most people's, was my mother. She wasn't a deeply religious woman, but she believed in a higher power, and she believed that you should respect that higher power with your life, with your actions, with your energy, with your work. When I was a kid, my mom was usually pretty supportive of sort of my adventures in life. She really liked me to discover things and try things out and see what I liked. But there were two specific times that I remember that my mom was really not having it. Okay? She was really not having my choices. The first was when I decided I wanted to be a cheerleader in high school. And the second is when I got saved and started going to church. She did not like the idea of me being a cheerleader, and I really wanted to do it. And so I went to her, I told her I was going to do it, and my usually supportive mom was not. For nothing, she was just not into it. On the basketball team, she was down for that. Student government, she was down for that. All that other kind of stuff, debate club, all that, she was down for that. But when I told her I wanted to be a cheerleader, that was not the move. It wasn't until a lot of years later that it occurred to me, that my mom was one of those strong black independent moms. She went to Vassar College in New York City. She finished a 4-year college in 2 years. She had 2 kids when she was really young. So she's been doing life in a different way her whole life. And to see me want to be a cheerleader, I think she had this fear or this concern that the daughter that she was raising to be a thinker and to be a doer and to be intellectual and all of that stuff, I think she had this fear that I was just going to become a go-along, somebody that just went along to get along, and that somehow that's what cheerleaders were and what cheerleaders do. I didn't understand that at first, but it took a few years before I realized that's what it was that she wasn't in support of. Actually, just a few years later, that I saw that same kind of worry and concern when I started living into my Christian faith. I don't really remember like the day or the time that I told my mom that I was saved. I know I use that language though, because that's the language you use. But I think I just started going to church a lot. And I think I just started talking about Jesus a lot. I just started talking about my church a lot. And every time I would bring it up, every time I would say I'm going to church or I'm going to do this with the church, she just had this angst. And I didn't get it. I didn't understand. Because I came from a Christian family. We went to church my entire upbringing. It wasn't until it became personal to me that she had a different perspective about it. And kind of like cheerleading, I guess, it was a while later that I think I understood what it was that was so problematic for her. It wasn't my faith and my devotion to Jesus. I think what it was my mom didn't want me to become one of them. One of those people who was extreme in either capacity, either extreme to the right or extreme to the left. And I think she was concerned that meshing myself into the church culture, particularly into the black church culture, I think she was concerned, the same way she was about cheerleading, that I would either be lulled into a personality or into a mindset that she didn't find meaningful for me, or that I would become one of those people who just had to fight for a cause. And she was concerned about that. I think she was concerned that with cheerleading and with becoming a full-fledged member of the church, that somehow I was going to get lost, and that my capacity to be a critical thinker and my capacity to actually do something meaningful in the world was going to get lost. I did not understand that then, because to me, living out my Christian faith and going to church felt like the most purposeful thing I had ever done with my life. But she didn't see it that way. And I think after studying these songs and studying this genre and studying the sermons, I think I get why. I get it. It sucks, but I get it. I've made a lot of statements, declarations about gospel music and preaching, and how I think there is a subtle, maybe not so subtle, danger embedded into the constant messaging that we get. So you might be asking, what am I proposing then? And if you're not asking it, then I'm asking it, because I think I need to propose something. I am not proposing a ban on gospel music. Heck no! It's like the best music there is. I am not proposing that songwriters and singers and preachers stop using this message to uplift and inspire people. People need to be uplifted and inspired. So please don't stop. And I'm not encouraging us to swing the pendulum so far the other way that we just start singing the other songs exclusively. That's not what I'm saying. I am proposing that we become more aware of this idea. And my hope is that awareness causes us to be more intentional about how much material we produce with that narrative. That we not allow ourselves to use or misuse that narrative to either do nothing or to do wrong. That we reassess what are struggles versus what are areas in our lives that just need to be addressed, and then address them. And that we separate our love and devotion to Jesus from our personal struggles, because the weight of who Jesus is ought to make us think on bigger world concerns, as opposed to just limiting him and his message on whatever we might be going through and what might be going on in our house. He cares about what's going on in your house, but he came that we might have life more abundantly. And the last time I checked, life is happening out there. Professor Jess Bielman is a friend and colleague of mine. He has taught spiritual formation at Warner Pacific University for years. And when I first told him what my premise was going to be for this work, he said he had never thought about it. But ever since we talked about it, it's all he can hear whenever he listens to gospel music and whenever he listens to certain people talk about their faith. It's like he can't unhear it now. He told me this story about one time he was in his class and he asked one of his students, a young African-American girl, to tell the class about her faith and about her background. And he said he was really caught by the fact that she could not get through one or two sentences without saying, I don't know. I just know that whatever I'm going through, God is there. He said the more she talked, the more she said the phrase. He said it was like she couldn't reason or rationalize her faith without going through something. And that's what gave her faith meaning. My guess is she doesn't even notice that she's saying it. And why would she notice it? It's the message that she's heard all 18 years of her life. And I think it's something that we should notice. Thank you for watching. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Thank you for allowing me to share my journey with you. Keep listening to good gospel music. Keep going to whatever church feels like home to you. And I don't know, maybe I'll catch you at a musical.